You know, AI is transforming business at a record pace. And if you're like most leaders, you're chasing that competitive edge. But if you're missing the human element that turns data into dollars, then your AI investment won't deliver the ROI you're expecting. You're about to discover how emotional intelligence becomes your ultimate business multiplier. Hi, and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and today's guest is extraordinary. Dr. Robin Hills is a business psychologist whose company, EI for Change, just won the International Impact Company of the Year by .com magazine. He's empowered over 500,000 people across 200 plus countries, spoken at Harvard, and earned the award for Best Emotional Intelligence Training Enterprise 2025 by Corporate America Today, and the Global 100 Awards by EMG Publishing. Today, Robin's revealing how EI plus AI equals ROI, your return on intelligence. Dr. Robin Hills, welcome to the Business of Story.
Park, it's a pleasure to be featured on your show. Thank you for having me.
Now, you don't like to go by Dr. Robin Hills. What's the backstory there?
Well, I was awarded an honorary doctorate from a Mexican university, having been nominated by an Indian company last year. Now, to be a doctor, most people take a PhD, they do a lot of research, and they're working for 3, 4, many years, perhaps even more than that, to get the title of doctor. So they've actually earned it, and they're quite proud of having that title. Having been awarded an honorary doctorate, I'm very proud of the fact that I've been awarded an honorary doctorate, but seeing as I wasn't out there looking for it, I feel a little bit uncomfortable when people call me Dr. Robin Hills. I haven't quite got used to it. And with it being an honorary doctorate, I can really only use it in certain circumstances. If people want to use it, then fine. But more often than not, outside of professional circles, I'm just Robin Hills. So I'm still the same man that I was before I got the title. And that's the important part.
Well, they're obviously recognizing you globally for your experience and your advancements and achievements in emotional intelligence and working with leaders and so forth. So it sounds like it was hard-earned won. Did I say that right? Hard-earned and/or/won through your body of work.
Yes, and I feel quite proud of the work that I've done, but at the same time, I'm incredibly humble. And I say, well, there are other people out there who are as deserving as me, and they haven't got it. But I've got to kind of learn to overcome that and actually wear the badge with honor.
You're not telling me you have imposter syndrome, do you?
Oh, yes, like everybody else. So here we are. I'm quite pleased and proud of where I am today. But I'm still the same old Robin Hills. I'm a father, I'm a partner, I'm a grandfather. And I think first and foremost, that's who I am. And then outside of that, my work title is important, but it's not what really drives me.
And you're coming to us from a scorching United Kingdom right now. I mean, you guys have been hot all summer long.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate in that we live slightly higher than most other people in the rainy part of Greater Manchester. So we've had lots of rain. We've got a very green lawn, whereas everybody else's is brown. But at the moment, we've got it hot.
Now, something captured my attention in your bio that you had sent over. And I want to start with that because it sounds like it was actually a personal physical affliction of losing your hearing, or not losing it in total, but having some hearing challenges that really launched you into paying attention to this emotional quotient, emotional intelligence world. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, sure. I didn't know I had hearing problems, apart from the fact that my wife and daughters kept nagging me and saying, I'm deaf, I'm deaf, I'm deaf. And I was saying to them, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not. So it turned out that I probably started losing my hearing in my early to mid 20s, and nobody picked up on it. And I was actually quite capable of using certain compensating mechanisms by actually really listening to the nuances behind language, and that's body language and the words spoken. And it helped me to build up a very high degree of empathy. And people would tell me that I was incredibly good at listening. And I didn't feel I was particularly good at listening, but obviously the way in which I'd learned to listen gave people the impression that I was listening. And obviously, I had to listen a bit harder and a bit deeper to actually understand what was being communicated to me. And then in my early to mid 50s, I went along to the doctor. I mentioned to the doctor that my wife was complaining about the fact that I was struggling to hear at times. And I expected him to say to me, "No, Robin, go away and tell her that you're listening to her as much as any other man." And he said, looking over your medical records, you have had problems with your ears over the years. I think we ought to get them investigated." And I thought, no, that's not the right answer. But anyway, I was put into the system. I went along and I had an MRI scan just to check that there was nothing there. And the audiology consultant was a bit confused because he said, "I can't see anything here at all. And there seems to be no indication as to why you are losing your hearing, but that's just the way it is. It is very down. So we've got a couple of things we can do. We can give you a set of hearing aids, or you can go in for the operation, but the operation's particularly high risk." So I thought, well, this stage of life, I might as well just have the hearing aids, because in 10, 15 years' time, I'll probably lose my hearing through some other mechanism anyway.
And how do you think that helped you with what you do today in teaching, training, coaching on emotional intelligence?
Well, I think quite honestly, Park, what it's given me is this insight into how people communicate. It's given me a deep insight into listening, active listening, and into empathy. And these are core components of emotional intelligence. So I feel I'm probably better placed than a lot of people to actually talk about these topics and to encourage people to utilize these topics in the most appropriate way.
Interesting. Now, I want to make a connection here that I'm very curious about. And in reading through your new book, the authority, let me say that again, the Authority Guide to Emotional Resilience in Business. And people can get this book from you free, right, on your website.
No, they can buy it through Amazon. The free book is Develop Your Emotional Intelligence.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had that just backwards. But to my question, and I found the phenomenon when we were all going through COVID of this brain fog that people were experiencing because of the gestalt of the uncertainty of COVID, being locked out of businesses, locked down in your home. Is this thing really a killer? Is it not a killer at the the scale that they're talking about? And there were so many unanswered life and death questions that people went through that there was a lot of study on this idea of people were losing memory. They were, of course, depressed. They had this brain fog. They didn't know why. And a lot of psychologists thought it was because it was the limbic survival brain dealing with the uncertainty. There's simply not knowing what's going to happen with COVID. And now I feel like we have that same thing coming on, or it's actually here with AI. And that so many people, especially in the business world, especially the brand storytellers that I speak with and the sales and enablement professionals, the marketing leaders, that there's this same sort of brain fog, concern, uncertainty, not knowing what to do with AI. And I find it to be a very similar phenomenon. One that was first one created, physically out of nature or scientists messing with nature. And now the second one with technologists messing with technology that is competing with our brain. And I'm curious, are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, I think what we're seeing here is a very similar pathway that people go through. It's an emotional pathway when they're faced with major changes. Now, obviously, the intensity of that pathway will vary from person to person, and not only the amplitude, but the length of the pathway is going to vary from person to person. And it's going to be compounded by other things that are going on in people's lives. When we go back to COVID, the first thing that people found is that they were incredibly anxious. They didn't know what the future held. And then they thought, okay, well, we're in this kind of situation. Let's make the most of it. And a lot of people went into denial and stayed in denial. But a lot of people then went down through the pathway in terms of recognizing the threat, feeling the fear, and then working with that, and then getting angry with everybody else. And then they started to realize, okay, well, there's no point in getting angry with everybody else. There's nothing we can do about it. So they kind of internalize the anger. And they then say, really, I shouldn't have behaved that way. And then they start going through anxiety or despair, or almost to the point of depression. And that was an incredibly long phase for a lot of people. And as they started to work through that, there was a degree of hostility towards everybody else, hostility towards care workers, hostility towards government officials and everything, which I think to a certain extent is still occurring today. But I think once we came out of it, we suddenly realized, okay, the world's changed. We've adapted around it. Let's carry on adapting around it and look towards the future and work with it. So I see a very, very, very similar pathway occurring with AI, but the threats, the anxiety and the threat are still incredibly intense. And again, a lot of people have gone off the curve and they are in denial. And a lot of people are starting to be very angry around it because they feel that they feel threatened by it. They feel that they're going to lose their job. And I think we've just got to recognize that in certain industries, in most industries, the jobs are going to change quite dramatically. Now, we can't go back to what it was. Well, the genie is out of the bottle and we've opened Pandora's box. So we've actually now got to work with it and embrace it. So whilst a lot of people are still going through the despair phase, and a lot of people are going to lose their jobs in the future, what I am actually saying to a lot of people is that emotional intelligence is the future for us as humanity. And once we realize this, we can work with emotional intelligence in order to get the outcomes that we want to future proof ourselves and utilize AI purely and simply as what it really is, a tool to help us get better.
Mhm. Now, you said that something interesting there to me. Emotional intelligence is the future. And yet, like storytelling, emotional intelligence has always been around, right? It's imbued in the Homo sapien storytelling ape. The future is artificial intelligence, which is here now. But I think what you're saying, like I often say with story, is we're not inventing anything new here, folks. Story has been around since the beginning of recorded time, as has emotional intelligence been. And yet so many people maybe either disregarded emotional intelligence through the years, or those leaders that really understood it and took advantage of it and embraced it are the ones, hopefully, that are leading, the major corporations and so forth. So your idea around EI is not new. It's been here. It's just now tapping into it to work with and collaborate with what's happening with AI to make us better human beings.
Absolutely. And I think if we start looking at how emotional intelligence sits within storytelling, you're right. What storytelling does is it taps into the emotions, and we either get excited by a story or we get angry with a story, or certain characters within the story, or we dislike certain characters, we go along with certain characters. Emotions drive the storytelling process, and we get a lot from stories. I mean, here I am teaching grandmother to suck eggs, Park. You are the master storyteller in
Wait, whoa,
terms of
whoa,
the
whoa,
work
whoa,
that
whoa!
you
You
do.
just
But
said I'm here teaching grandmother to suck eggs. I've not
yeah,
heard
that's
that
an idiom that
colloquialism
we
before.
use in the United Kingdom. It's an idiom. Teaching grandmother to suck eggs. It is so simple that when you're telling somebody something that they already know, we would use that idiom, teaching grandmother to suck eggs, and everybody would say, "Oh, yeah, all right, okay.
Well,
I bow to
that's
the
a
higher
story in and of
authority."
itself.
It is, isn't it? It
Yeah.
is. But you see, I think the important thing here, I think the important thing to say here is that AI can create stories, but there's no emotional impact within those stories. It can create art, but look at the art. It's very, very false. There's no emotional impact within the art. I think as human beings, what we do is we innovate and we take risks, and we use our creativity to engage with other people. If we have a look at art, we can have a look at a piece of art. What is it? We either look at it and think, that's horrible, we don't like it. That disgusts us, that makes us angry, or we think, yeah, that makes us feel incredibly warm, incredibly happy, and we embrace that piece of art. It's the same with storytelling. It's the same with going along and watching films. It's the same with actors. It's the same with comedians. These people, uh, really, their future is guaranteed and assured because AI cannot do that.
Well, what's funny, last week on LinkedIn, Alicia Spalding, who I don't know, she's a marketing AI professor and AI times food times marketing strategic something or other. Anyways, she posted a photo of a slice of rainbow cake. There were 4 different photos. She labeled them A, B, C, and D, and she says, which photo is real? And my response to that is, well, they're all real because you're looking at them. That's a real photo sitting there. They have just been created differently, either with an actual camera or with AI taking its artificial intelligence and everything it knows about rainbow cake and providing you 3 photos compared to the quote unquote real photo. But I think they're all real. They're just created differently.
That's right. And of course, they will give us a certain emotional response. And if we can't tell the difference, we can't tell the difference. Does it matter? I think the important thing is what we do with the image and how we work with the image, because AI will chuck out an image. And often they can be very good images, and often they're not quite so good
Mm-hmm.
images, but they will chuck out an image and they have no AI has no understanding of the impact that that image will have on humans, and they can't really advise us how to utilize that in the most emotional way.
So, one of our topics that I wanted to cover is this idea of using emotional intelligence to truly understand your audience and tailor your stories to your audience needs. And to me and you, emotional intelligence has been around forever. Storytelling has been around forever. So that's kind of a given. I'd like for you, number one, to talk a little bit about how you do that. But then number two, how do you apply emotional intelligence to artificial intelligence or vice versa to amplify your ability to tell those same stories to your audiences?
Sure. I think before we actually get into the conversation, what I will do is I'll give you my definition of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is being smart with your feelings. It's utilizing the data that is inherent within emotions in order to make good quality decisions and build up authentic relationships and then take action. So if we understand that, then what we're trying to do with emotional intelligence is to engage with people through authenticity in order to move our relationship forward. And if we do it with the right morals and the right values, we're using emotional intelligence in the most appropriate way. I'm going to step back a little bit. What are emotions? Emotions are physiological and psychological reactions to our environment. So, if we are reacting physiologically and psychologically to changes within the environment, we can't label an emotion as good or bad, positive or negative. What we have to do is to look at this emotion and say, how does this make me feel? It might feel a bit unpleasant, but how can I use it constructively? Or how do I stop myself from using this emotion in a destructive manner? And it could be happiness, often labeled a positive emotion. That can be quite destructive when it's used in an inappropriate way. So, what we have to do when we start looking with AI is to look at it purely and simply, as I've said earlier, it's a tool. How do we utilize it in order to embrace our humanity? And we do that in a number of different ways. We've already started to talk about some of those ways, Park, in terms of innovation and creativity. The other thing that we can do as human beings that the robots can't is we can be entrepreneurial. We can take risks. We can do things that AI just has no capacity to do. We can build networks and groups of people. We can motivate. We can drive. We can inform. We can persuade other people. We can do it through storytelling. And so by so doing, we then build up a great network of people through empathy. Again, something that the robots will find incredibly difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And really the final point, and I think the big point around emotional intelligence builds in another intelligence, and that's spiritual intelligence. Why are we here? What meaning has our life got, our lives got? How can we connect with people in order to give their lives meaning? How can we be kind to them in order to move ourselves forward and our relationships forward? And these are things that only we can do as humans, but we've got AI there to support us and make us even better at doing that.
And AI as a tool, at least to me, helps remove the minutia and the little tedium that we all deal with day in and day out in business and leadership and so forth by doing a lot of that thinking for us, presenting its ideas that then we bring our emotional intelligence to and rework, work on, develop. But it's taken a lot of that energy that we would have normally have had to expel to get that intel for ourselves to move forward with whatever project, be it a story, be it a strategy, be it whatever, and does that work for us. So now we are dealing with validation, we're dealing with revealing gaps that we need to close, and we're dealing with inspiration because it looks at what our approach in a little bit different way, but it ultimately rests on the shoulders of that Homo sapien storytelling ape, us, to now bring that emotional intelligence and that real emotional connection to people.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Park. And what I would say to everybody who's listening to this podcast, AI will transform your jobs. You can either be done unto or you can do unto AI. And I think the most important thing for everybody to do is to look at their jobs and look at it really, really, really critically. Look at their jobs really critically and say, what are the bits that AI will do in the future? Because, okay, they might be the bits that I'm good at. They may be the bits that I'm skilled at. And if that is the only thing that is driving you, and that is a fundamental part of your job, I'm sorry to say that is going to go. So, in terms of identifying your current role, where do you use creativity? Where do you use innovation? Where do you take risks? Where do you build up networks of people? Where do you use empathy? Because if you can identify those, and also going back, where do why are you doing the job? What is the meaning that you attribute to the job? And what is the meaning that is attributed to other people in the team? If you can identify those parts of your job, really focusing on them and build up your skill set in those areas, your future is assured. The job will change, but you will be future proofing yourself.
Yeah, the job function will change, the execution of that job will change, but maybe for the better in a lot of different ways because, like you say, it's leveling up into our human intellect and our creativity. Something I like to say is I ask people, where do you bleed? And by bleed, I mean, where is your passion? Where is your curiosity? Where are you willing to take risks that are scary because they can blow up in your face, but they can also really advance yourself and your project and your humanity on your unique core talents and skills. So, of course, bots don't bleed, but humans do. And I asked myself, where do you bleed? Where are you willing to really lay it down and go for it, using AI to help amplify that impact, but not take that impact away from you?
No, that's exactly it. It really is a case of strategically looking to the future and then putting in place the plans, as I've said, to future proof yourself.
Mm.
Let me build a little story in here, and I think it's an absolutely vital story to tell at this point. When I had graduated at the back of the 1970s, early 80s, the first email hadn't been sent. The internet hadn't been invented. Computers were only just coming onto the market. They were little tiny computer gaming things with about 32K worth of memory. And all we could do is to really batter a pixel backwards and forwards in terms of a tennis game. And then it started to evolve into pixelated little men going up ladders. Televisions were great cathode ray monstrosities that sat in the front room. You turned it on and waited for it to warm up. Color television had only just been invented. In terms of listening to music, we had vinyl records, and that was it. Oh, suddenly we had a new medium. Digital medium, compact discs, they came in. They were going to revolutionize the way in which we were listening to music. If I wanted to contact a friend of mine, I actually had to go into a room and pick up a telephone, which more often than not was stuck on the wall, dial up. I couldn't see them at the other end as I was talking to them. And I actually had to try and phone them when I knew they might be around to take the call. I mean, I can go on and on and on about some of these things that happened in the 80s. Look at where we are now. Look at the transformation that has happened in the last 40 years. I think what people have got to do is to look at future proofing themselves by saying, okay, we don't know what is going to happen over the next 40 years, but we need to position ourselves in a way in order to embrace new ideas, to work with them, to challenge them, say, are these appropriate? Move forward with them. One thing I can be certain about, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true, I'm probably not going to be here in the next 40 years. Well, this is where spirituality comes in. Why am I here? What is my legacy going to be? And looping back to right to the beginning of the conversation, yeah, I've got an honorary doctorate. So, if I could embrace that and work with it, it gives my life a certain level of meaning. And I would encourage everybody to actually say, what is it that is giving your life meaning? Because if you can answer that, then you really will be future proofing yourself and protecting yourself from the ravages of AI.
Now, the ravages of AI, yes, it could be ravenous, but I think it could also really, really help us in lots of different areas. So, I just picture like a New Yorker cartoon of two big dinosaurs out in the middle of a swamp. One of them's got its head down eating. The other one's looking up at this meteor coming towards them that says AI. And that's all you got to say. If you are not looking up and paying attention to this trajectory of AI, it is going to absolutely impact you, if not eliminate you from the current, career course you're on. And it's something that, I pushed back on a couple of years ago, like, oh, really? Is this really going to take over? No, we can beat this. But now, after using it so much, I see the real benefit in it, because it goes back to that question, where do you bleed? My bleed is in helping people become better storytellers. And in doing so, they can absolutely AI, not to replace their natural storytelling, but to be able to amplify that, to educate them on how to do it, to share insights and inspiration and ideas on the kinds of stories to tell, and then you take it over from there. Then you go and find those stories, those moments in your life that have had a huge impact, and then you go and naturally share those stories with people to help you make a business point, a leadership point, a motivational point, a doomsday point. Here's what we don't want to do, because I did this before. My favorite line in business is, every shortcut, Robin, I've ever taken in business has simply led me to disaster faster. That's a moral of a story, and I can tell you 10 times that I made that mistake to make that point. AI can never replace that.
No, I know. I think just look at what you keep repeating, which I think is absolutely wonderful. Where do you bleed? AI does not bleed.
Exactly right. And that's what separates us from the bots. Let's move on to something that I was looking at too in the bio you sent over. Using empathy to craft narratives that resonate deeply and authentically. So again, AI is never going to be able to replace that. But the beautiful thing about AI, to me anyways, it's an algorithm machine, because everything it does is if this, then that. And it is the ultimate word processor, because all it is doing is knitting together series of letters and spaces and punctuations to create meaning that we can all relate to. So what I'd like to do real quick is, of course, like every guest on the show now, I ran your brand through the StoryCycle Genie. And in a minute, we'll tell the audience what little hallucination it did do on your behalf, and then when we tweaked it, how much better it became. But I want to read the and, but, therefore statement about your brand to your number one audience of corporate leaders and executives. And Robin, for you, what I would like for you to listen to and then challenge me on is the and but therefore is an algorithm that uses the three forces of story, of agreement, contradiction, and consequence, that apparently our primal pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain adores. Loves to get information and set up problem resolution way, because it makes it very easy. It's like code. It's like a user experience. It makes a great user experience for that solution-driven brain, that survival brain, to understand a situation immediately. So having said that, let me read the ABT that our StoryCycle Genie wrote about you for your corporate leaders and executives. And then right after, I want to break it down real quick on how EI, emotional intelligence, is built into it. And we didn't do this with AI. It's something I recognized while we were teaching the and but therefore for many years. But now you and folks like you have brought this to my attention and like, oh, we're talking about emotional intelligence. Okay, so first, the algorithm or the three forces of story of setup, problem, resolution, or agreement, contradiction, consequence. And it starts. As a corporate leader, you want to inspire peak performance across your organization and create the kind of authentic leadership presence that drives both innovation and human connection. That's our statement of agreement. But you feel frustrated because traditional leadership development doesn't address the emotional complexities of leading in today's rapidly changing business environment. Therefore, statement of consequence. You can achieve breakthrough leadership effectiveness and organizational transformation through EI for Change's scientifically backed emotional intelligence mastery programs, designed specifically for executives who need to excel in both strategic thinking and emotional wisdom. So with that, number one, let me first get your take on that reasoning, that quick little story about what it is you do at EI for Change, and then I'll talk about how the emotional intelligence quotient is built into it.
Park, firstly, I think that is absolutely brilliant. I looked at this when I received it and read it with interest and thought that actually sums up what I do in a very few succinct statements. It, as you say, tells a story. However, I wouldn't actually approach any senior executive or senior leader with the badge of emotional intelligence. I know my reason for being, and my company is EI for Change, EI Emotional Intelligence. But I think there's still a little bit of anathema out there around emotional intelligence at the senior leadership level. A lot of leaders equate emotional intelligence with emotions, and a lot of leaders are very frightened and fearful of bringing too many emotions into the work environment. They consider them to be inappropriate for the type of culture that they're trying to create. And I think where that has stemmed from is the fact that during the early part of their career, they probably experienced people being incredibly emotional. And I'll put that in inverted commas because what they mean by that is people cry, people get angry, people are not able to control their emotions. But if we look at emotions as being a fundamental part of everything that we do, that drives our decision making and drives the way in which we build relationships, we change things. So really, when I'm talking to people at a very senior level, I don't even mention the two words emotional and intelligence together. What are they looking for? They're looking for exactly what you've said. They're looking at building up a culture where people can grow and thrive and they can serve customers. So, what is it that EI for Change does? EI for Change helps people with leadership skills, communication skills, collaboration, understanding themselves better through self-awareness in order to improve relationships with clients, with stakeholders internally and externally. We're looking at building up those authentic relationships for the long term. No mention of emotional intelligence. If people then say, oh, you're talking about emotional intelligence, yes, we are. But more often than not, I will leave a conversation with a senior leader never having said those two words.
Yeah, it's not about what you make, but what you make happen. And everything you just beautifully described there are the outcomes that you create for people. The emotional intelligence is simply the vehicle to get there. They may not even care about that vehicle or they dismiss that vehicle because they are so focused on the outcome. Once they've bought into the outcome that you can create for them, now they're much more open to the vehicle.
Yes, and I think it's only fair to say here, Park, that when I did start my career back in the 80s, I was a salesman. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 15 years in terms of medical selling. So when I'm actually communicating with senior doctors and senior leaders within the National Health Service here in the United Kingdom, I was focusing in on the benefits that my products would provide for them. It wasn't about features. And again, can I use that idiom? I'm teaching grandmother to suck eggs here. Um, I think the
Of course.
important thing to say here is that this is fundamental to good communication skills. It's fundamental to persuasion. It's fundamental to influence. There I was, a young man in my early 20s, going into my mid 30s, talking to people who had been in the profession longer than I'd been on the planet and trying to encourage them to change their behavior. How do you do that? Well, you do it in a number of ways. You do it by talking about what you can do for them, how you can help, and how you can make their job better. And you use very deep, empathetic, active listening. And you've got to have the ability to ask that deep, penetrating question that they don't want to be asked.
So going back to your ABT, it captured the overall essence of what you do, but not necessarily how you might say that directly to an audience. And all we're doing at this point is simply building the brand brain inside the StoryCycle Genie about your brand, EI for change. And it uses, again, that algorithm and those three forces of story to get you there. But here's where I see that the emotional intelligence is automatically built in. And again, I recognized this 7-8 years ago, before AI, before I was thinking about that. But when you write a brief little story using the and, but, therefore, you have to actually employ three major emotional triggers. And that is understanding. You need to demonstrate that you understand your audience, and you do that by introducing them at the very beginning. As a corporate leader, you want to inspire peak performance across your organization. So you're demonstrating understanding. Then, after the and, in the second clause there, you are underscoring appreciation for who they are and what they want. So as a corporate leader, you want to inspire peak performance across your organization and create the kind of authentic leadership presence that drives both innovation and human connection. And all you're trying to do there is get your audience to be nodding in agreement, statement of agreement. Wow, you've done your homework. Wow, you understand me. Wow, you're getting between my ears. So you've got understanding, you've got appreciation, and then you insert empathy in the but statement of contradiction. But you feel frustrated. You follow with an emotion right there. In the B2B world, they immediately go right to the problem. But we like to follow with emotion, but you feel frustrated. Then we use that really powerful conjunction word of because, that lots of studies demonstrate how powerful because is in a statement to create behavior change. So, but you feel frustrated because traditional leadership development doesn't address the emotional complexities of leading in today's rapidly changing business environment. Now that you've used and demonstrated understanding, appreciation, and empathy, they are much more open to your call to action, which is the therefore statement, and you lead by still speaking from your audience's point of view. Therefore, you can achieve breakthrough leadership effectiveness and organizational transformation through EI4 changes, scientifically backed emotional intelligence mastery programs, so on and so forth. The brand in your offering does not come in until the second clause, the last clause of the entire ABT, the second clause in the therefore statement of consequence. And we have found this algorithm not only plays to that pattern-seeking, problem-solving limbic brain, but it also plays to their emotional centers because you're demonstrating understanding, appreciation, and empathy in a very quick little short story.
Yes, as I say, I'm amazed and at how good that output is. I think the other important thing to say here is the more you actually engage with people, your customers and your clients, and the more you listen to them, the better those statements will become, because you really will not only understand them, but you'll firmly believe them, and you'll be able to express them in an appropriate way through the way in which that person is reacting to you, through the body language, through their tone of voice, and the way in which they are they're talking to you. So again, the deep, effective, empathetic listening is a core part of that. And good salespeople are empathetic salespeople, and good salespeople are emotionally intelligent salespeople. And there is a role that AI is very unlikely to take over.
Well, and think about it too, when you are looking at the output of the Genie or any other AI you might be using out there, you have to bring an empathetic eye to it as well. Is what the Genie is telling me, is it accurate? How close is it? What do I need to change? Are we missing an emotional impact here that I need to add into it? And so you infuse the Genie as it's creating your brand story with your empathy, and you ask it to rephrase things and do it the way you want it to do. And the other thing about this is the entire program, the entire Genie, letting your genius out of the bottle, was all first created with understanding, appreciation, and empathy, because we're simply taking our IP from the StoryCycle system that we created long before AI was around, and how people, emotionally connect and move people to action. And we just simply taught this particular agent, our StoryCycle Genie, how to think and process it that way, using as much emotion and empathy as possible, while also using and leveraging its super powerful logic and reason brains to be able to look at competition, look at the market and whatever, and infuse that intellect into your emotional intelligence. And together you are creating this brand story.
Oh yes, and look, let me say to you that for years I have been struggling to bottle the essence of what AI for change is capable of doing. And I think I was getting there, but it was very woolly around the edges. What came out of the StoryCycle Genie, or me, was a wonderful way of expressing exactly what the company is about and what it does. And I did look at it, and I did report this back to you, Park. I did look at it, and I did think, no, that's not me. It's too good. And then I sat down and I looked at it, taking that humility away and just saying, yeah, all right, let's have a look at that. That is exactly what I'm about. That is exactly what EI for Change is. And that has captured the essence in a fantastic way. And thank you so much, Mark, for having run me and the an AI for Change, my brand, through the algorithm.
Well, and we mentioned you're welcome, and I'm so glad you were open to it. And we mentioned the first time we ran it through, and I did not catch it because it was like one or two lines in it, but it was informing the brain that it conflated you with a Dan Hill. And you say, Dan, I don't know Dan. I did not catch that. You sent it back. You said, everything's brilliant except this one Dan Hill part. So I said, cool, okay. So large language models will sometimes do that, but very, very rarely does it happen in the Genie. So I was kind of excited to see it happen for you, because then I went back into the Genie and say, whoa, you conflated. Dan Hill has nothing to do with EI for Change. Take him out, take his book out, and redo the brand story. And it did that in about 30 seconds. And then I sent you the revised brand story, removing Dan Hill altogether. And you had sent me a note back that you felt like that one was even better than the first one you got.
It was, and I've got to actually take my hat off to Dr. Dan Hill. He's a Canadian, and he did some work for us when I was working with the Association for Business Psychology in the Northwest, sitting on their committee, and he came along and presented his emotionomics nod model to the psychologists that had attended that meeting. And I've got to actually say, I take my hat off to Dan, and I thank him for his work because it was inspiring, and it inspired me to go away and infuse a lot of his thinking and a lot of his modeling within EI for Change. So the story cycle genie wasn't necessarily wrong. It's just that it kind of picked up something that was inappropriate around EI for Change and where it stands now. But I think one of the things that I was really, really impressed by is looking at the archetypes, the three archetypes that came out of the story genie, because I'm actually quite a great advocate of Jungian archetypes. And it's something that we are now looking at exploring in the future, taking EI for change into the 2030s. And I will just say that as a little bit of a heads up. This is where we're going. So the idea of the archetypes here was fascinating, and it came up with three for EI for change: the sage, the magician, and the caregiver. And when I look at those in combination, I've just got to say, yeah, that is exactly what I want myself and EI for Change to be.
Well, that's awesome. And that means it's being communicated. Those personalities are already being communicated through your website and your content. So the fact that it's showing up the way you would like it to show up means you're already doing a good job in those areas. And all we're doing here is training the brand brain inside the StoryCycle Genie how to think about and express your unique brand character to the world, so that when inside the Genie you are creating any marketing strategy and or content, it is playing off of these archetypes in your voice, so that the content it writes on your behalf is as authentic and nailed as possible. We find it gets you about 90% of the way there. Then you've got to bring your humanity in just to do a little tweaking here and there to make it, uniquely your own voice. But it, again, takes out all that time and effort, removing that blank page, removing that blank stare, giving you a page of inspiration that you can then go in, work with, and tweak. The last thing I want to ask you about, and I'm always kind of surprised by this answer, is number one, do you already have a unique value proposition in place for your company?
Very much so. And I think a lot of it came out of my thinking around why I feel I should accept and be honored by the honorary doctorate. It really was and I won't be able to say it as well as Cycle Genie is capable of saying it, but it really was taking the essence of emotional intelligence, making it practical and making it applicable, and creating it for people. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling over the words here. It was actually doing it through online learning, and the the difficulty in terms of online training around emotional intelligence is that people can't learn to swim by reading a book. People can't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. People can't learn to be more emotionally intelligent by reading a book. You've actually got to go away and practice it. So what I'm trying to do through the online courses is to inspire people to go away, make mistakes, get things wrong, upset people, but learn through it and do it for the right reasons, and do it with kindness, in order that they build up their authentic selves and build up their authentic relationships. Sorry, that's a very long, garbled explanation around our unique selling point, but I feel that that is so much a part of who we are and what we are, that that's the way to express it. But StoryCycle Genie said it in a much more concise way, and I've got to go away and learn that.
Yeah, it came up with a unique value proposition right down to what, 6 words. And those 6 words are emotional mastery for the AI age.
And I think that has captured it incredibly well. Just to build upon that, Park, and I think this is important for your listeners to hear. I did go into AI probably about a year ago, and I put in the brand EI for Change. I put in a bit of detail about myself, and I put in the website URL, and I did say to the AI tool that I was using, can you suggest some colors that I should use to work together within the website in order to give over the emotional impact that I am seeking for through the website? And I was absolutely amazed that it came back with exactly the colors that I was using in the right combination. It added in a couple of other colors for contrast, which I thought, oh, that's good, and I'll utilize those when appropriate. So, really, what we've got with AI is a very, very valuable tool. And I think what we've got to do, and this is the essence of what we've been saying all the time, is use it. But it's a tool. Let's not be frightened by it. I'd be frightened if we weren't working with it properly. We've got a lot to learn in terms of how to use it and how to get the best outcomes from it. But if we apply it in the most appropriate way, it will take humanity in places we've not even thought of and not even dreamed of.
And Robin, the way I like to bring it all together is EI plus AI equals ROI. And by ROI, I mean return on intelligence.
And I think we could use the other expression of ROI as well, return on investment.
Without a doubt. Well, this has been just amazing. I appreciate your time. You had mentioned that you had a freebie for our listeners. We talked about it early in the show. Would you mind just letting them know what that is again, and we'll put the link in the show notes?
Yes, well, as we've talked about all the way through our conversation, EI for Change provides emotional intelligence online courses. So I felt it was only appropriate and pertinent to offer your listeners a free course, which I have done, and I provided a unique URL for you, which I'm sure you'll put in the notes there, Part. It's
Mm-hmm.
insights into emotional intelligence, and it will give you some insights into emotional intelligence. But the way in which you will develop your emotional intelligence is to go away and practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it in order to get the mastery that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Well, Robin, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to that scalding summer out there in the UK. And we just so much appreciate your intelligence you've brought to this very emotional conversation. Thank you.
It's been brilliant, Park. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. And if you want to put EI plus AI to work for you for a huge return on ROI, your return on intelligence, then check out the StoryCycle Genie at StoryCycleGenie.ai. It will revolutionize how you think about your brand story, help you craft it, enable you to iterate on it, because it's more than a tool, it's actually a teammate. And then, as you heard from Robin, how powerful the outcome can be when it distills your brand story down to its very essence. And it does it in minutes, not months. So check it out, StoryCycleGenie.ai. Join me next week when we will have an amazing international filmmaker here, Nick Francis of Casual Films. He's going to share his focus that really started and it was inspired by a quote from a famous war photographer, Robert Capa. His quote is this: "If your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough." learn how this also applies to your brand storytelling. Until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one a great one. Thanks so much for listening.